Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. As we continue with Part 7, Buddhism in China, from the Adepts in the Eastern Esoteric Tradition, by Manly Palmer Hall, Part 3, The Sages of China. Buddhism in China. After the introduction of Buddhism into China during the reign of the Emperor of Ming Ti, about the year AD 67, Indian philosophy began to influence the shaping of Chinese religious thought. Taoism and Confucianism were already firmly established, the former emphasizing the worship of spirits and the latter veneration for ancestors. It was quite reasonable, therefore, that a system of thought centering around the individual, his personal problems and needs, should gain favor and win converts. For a time, Buddhism was set apart as a foreign doctrine. By degrees, however, it was absorbed into the Chinese lifeway, enriching the native faith and in turn itself taking on a distinctly Chinese complexion. In this alchemistical mingling of apparently irreconcilable beliefs, Confucianism was the least affected, probably due to the intellectual level upon which it flourished. The intimate association which developed between Taoism and Buddhism is clearly indicated in the early religious dramas and theatrical productions of the Chinese. In Taoism, the favorite subject for dramatization was the fate of human souls in the after-death state. For many centuries, the Temple of the Universe in Peking was famous for its elaborate sequences of statues, each depicting the misfortunes and punishments which must be undergone by evildoers in the afterlife. Each group of figures represented a particular form of punishment, and the result was a gruesome panorama of torments and tortures. Incidentally, the courtyard of this temple was the gathering place for lepers, which did not lighten the atmosphere. The cycle of Buddhist religious plays dealt principally with the law of rebirth. Punishments were included, but always with the optimistic overtone that man would ultimately attain liberation through his own virtue, or the intercession of the bodhisattvas of the Mahayana school of popular Buddhistic metaphysics. The cycle of reincarnation with its 12 nidanas, or states of re-embodiment, is traditionally presented in a wistful and whimsical manner. The concept is permeated throughout with an atmosphere of consolation. Everyone is punished for his own good and in order that his future conduct will bring appropriate rewards and blessings. All Buddhism emphasizes growth and unfoldment. The end of the long road of life with its periodic rebirths is illumination and emancipation. The guardian Buddhas with their gilded masks and the gentle teachers with their shaven heads are always present like kindly parents. They inspire a patient acceptance of karma and encourage sufferers to fit themselves for future peace and security. The gracious Kuan Yin intercedes for those who suffer, and the luminous Maitreya awaits to receive into the kingdom of the blessed all who have conquered the weaknesses and imperfections in themselves. Naturally, the stories, legends, and themes include the lives of good men and emphasize the wonderful virtues which they practiced and for which they have received an adequate compensation. For the Chinese, dominated as they are by strict traditional forms, all the punishments and rewards after death are regulated by an inflexible code of legality. In each of the purgatories are properly instituted courts of jurisprudence presided over by judges and lawyers. All evidence is carefully weighed and there can be no miscarriages of justice. There are also jurists who watch the administration of rewards and punishments. Everything is extremely proper, but this in no way mitigates the dominant code. The Taoist plays emphasize justice, final and absolute, but the Buddhist pageantry emphasizes mercy, immediate and available. The Chinese, therefore, live in a universe in which justice and mercy parallel each other, but do not always meet. It is a foregone conclusion that under such a system, the factual thinking of Confucius should have appealed to those intellectuals who, considering themselves emancipated from all superstition, chose to cling to a formal system of ethics and deport themselves accordingly. It is said that early Buddhist monks coming to China built their first temples in strict conformity with Chinese architecture and exchanged their Hindu robes for Chinese vestments. Father Favier, in his elaborate work, Peking, devotes considerable space to the establishment of Christian missions in China. Again, it is noticeable that the early missions were patterned after native buildings, and the missionary priests and fathers frequently wore the approved dress of Chinese scholars and mandarins. In the earlier case of Buddhism, Chinese ways and customs encroached heavily upon the imported doctrine, and all phases of it passed through progressive modifications. The historical Buddha retained his Indian identity, but never attained outstanding public favor. He was acknowledged as the founder of the system, but many generations of converts revealed a clear preference for two of the bodhisattvas Avalokiteshvara and Maitreya. In due course, cycles of Chinese legends transformed these bodhisattvas so completely that they now appear almost totally Chinese. Avalokiteshvara, who is Prime Minister in Amitabha's paradise, is not directly mentioned in the earliest Buddhist writings. Some believe that he was originally a sun deity of Central Asia. In the Mahayana system, he is an emanation or extension of the powers of the Buddha Amitabha. He has long been regarded as the personification of the attributes of mercy. Gradually, this bodhisattva absorbed the Hindu attributes of Brahma and Ishvara and became a symbol of the spiritual body of the universe. His eyes and arms have been infinitely multiplied, and he gave to the world the mysterious formula Om Mani Padme Hum, which bestows liberation to those who are able to discover its true meaning and intone it correctly. In early writings, Avalokiteshvara is represented as a male being or perhaps as an androgyne. But in passing within the Chinese sphere of influence, this bodhisattva lost nearly all of his Hindu attributes. He was transformed into a gracious heavenly queen under the name Quan Shi Yin, the one who hears, knows, and is aware of the prayers of all mortals. Of this, E.T.C. Werner says, "As Mary is the guiding spirit of Rome, so is Kuan Yin of the Buddhist faith." The complete transition of Avalokiteshvara to Kuan Yin seems to have been accomplished as early as the Tang dynasty, but there are some exceptions in accordance with the doctrine of certain schools. As goddess of mercy, or more correctly, the bodhisattva of compassion, Kuan Yin is worshipped and supplicated wherever Buddhist influence has been established in China. As the taking away fear Buddha, this gracious lady enters into the intimate life of parent and child. She protects those who travel to far places. She is present at the bedside of the sick. She comforts the dying and guides the souls of the departed to the western paradise of Amitabha. She is closely associated with motherhood and may be depicted as pregnant or carrying a newborn child in her arms. Numerous miracles are attributed to her, and her miraculous intercessions are identical in quality with those associated with the Virgin Mary. Even in recent years, books testifying to her benevolent protection have been widely circulated among the Chinese. Kuan Yin, represented as the Good Mother. Abbé Favier, Vicar General of Peking, says that this figure is reminiscent of the Virgin Mary from Favier's Peking. The Chinese legend of Kuan Yin is stripped of all Hindu associations. According to this version, she was the youngest of the three daughters of Miao Chuang, who lived in the 7th century BC. Her real name was Miao Shan, and from her earliest childhood she was distinguished for her virtue, modesty, and gentleness of spirit. Her ambitious father, who had taken his kingdom by force, was resolved that his three daughters should make rich and powerful alliances. Because he had no sons, the king, upon the advice of his counselors, had decided to name the most fitting of his sons-in-law as his successor. Suitable husbands were found for the two older girls, but the youngest daughter declined to marry, for she was resolved to dedicate her life to works of holiness. This so infuriated her royal father that he inflicted numerous punishments upon her in an effort to overcome her obstinacy. When all these failed, he finally ordered her execution, and she attained immortality through martyrdom. Actually, however, only the body of Miao Shan was sacrificed. The immortals, mindful of her noble determination, decreed that she should attain a state of blessedness. They appointed the guardian of the soil of Xiangshan to transport the gentle maiden to a place of safety. This transcendent being took upon himself the form of a tiger, and when Miao Shan seated herself on the back of the tiger, she was carried in the twinkling of an eye to the foot of the rocky slopes of Puto Island. Here she remained for 9 years and attained perfection. Concerning her life and adventures among the immortals, there is an extensive lore. In due time, her numerous works of charity and virtue resulted in her canonization. This was bestowed by the immortals themselves, and the proclamation read in part as follows: Miao Shan will have the title of very merciful and very compassionate Pusa, savior of the afflicted, miraculous and always helpful protectress of mortals. On your lofty, precious lotus flower throne you will be the sovereign of the southern seas and of Pu Tuo Isle. In his outline of Chinese symbolism and art motives, Cass Williams writes that the island of Pu Tuo in the Chusan archipelago is sacred to the Buddhists, the worship of Kuan Yin being the most prominent feature on account of the fact that the goddess is said to have resided there for 9 years. The full name of the island is Pu Tuo Loka, from Mount Pataloka, whence the goddess, in her transformation as Avalokita, looks down upon mankind. There are nearly 100 monasteries and temples on the island with over 1,000 monks. It has also been noted that Kuan Yin has 3 birth dates, and gifts are made to her on the 19th days of the 2nd, 6th and 9th moons. It is obvious that this legend cannot be entirely reconciled with the older Hindu version, but this is of slight concern to the Chinese mind, which accepts her as totally Chinese, although her primary functions retain their Indian significance. As a standing figure, she carries a green branch or a vase-like bottle from which she pours the waters of life. She also appears often, however, with some Indian attributes in the Buddhist lore of Japan under the name Kwanon. The Buddha Maitreya, Chinese Mi Li, is often regarded as one of the early arhats of Buddhism, though not a personal disciple of Gautama, and it is said that he was the founder of an esoteric philosophical school. He was honored by statues and inscriptions as early as 350 BC. In Chinese religious art, he is usually represented as an exceedingly rotund, smiling figure carrying in one hand a rosary. His name means gentleness, but he is popularly called the Laughing Buddha. Maitreya, as the Buddha to come, and the nearest equivalent in this sect to the concept of a Messiah, is reported to abide in the Tushita heaven. It was there that Gautama appointed him as his successor to appear on earth 5,000 years after the nirvana of the great Buddha. The Tushita heaven is a celestial world in the making. It has existed for great ages of time, but is not yet perfected. It will be the paradisical sphere in that future day when Maitreya becomes the appointed teacher of humanity. There is a legend that the Maitreya Buddha incarnated among the 18 Lohans, where he is known as the Venerable Pu. In the list of the Arhats or Lohans, he is placed in the 17th position and is called Ajita, although the Chinese prefer Putai Hoshang and know him as the Calico Bag Monk, since he is frequently associated with a large sack. Sometimes children play around him. There are various interpretations of the meaning of these children. Sometimes they are called 6 little thieves, representing the deadly sins, and at other times they are likened to arhats, or disciples who have not yet attained their spiritual maturity. In the Lama Temple at Peking, a palace which was presented to the priests in AD 1740, there is a colossal figure of the Lord Maitreya. The image, which is made of sandalwood and overlaid with gold, is 75 feet in height, and to examine it closely, one must climb to the various balconies of the temple. Although this deity has taken on the art style of the Tang dynasty and has been adopted totally into the Chinese religious psychology, it retains its essentially Hindu meaning. In the Hung ritual, the reference to the man who is waited for probably refers to Maitreya. Buddha delivering his last sermon to his arhats, from illustrated actions of the Sakyamuni Buddha. The Buddhist circle of 18 arhats or lohans is essentially Hindu. The saints were the disciples of Buddha, or famous sages who arose within the sect. The principal Chinese contribution in this case has been the development of traditional likenesses for these holy persons as they are now pictured by Chinese artists. These likenesses were the works of painters of the Tang dynasty, and as a result, the saintly arhats take on distinctly Chinese features and fashions. The 18 arhats are Pindola, the Bharadaja, Kanaka, the Vasta, the second Pindola, Nandimitra, Vakula, Tamrabhadra, a cousin of Buddha, Kalika, Vajraputra, Gobaka, the protector, Pantha, the elder, Rahula, the son of Buddha, Nagasena, Angida, Vanavasa, Ajita, Maitreya, Pantha, the younger, Atsuta, also associated with Maitreya, and Polotoshi, probably a form of Pindola. Each of the lohans has a traditional appearance and is accompanied by distinguishing symbols. For details, consult outlines of Chinese symbolism and art motives by C.A.F. Williams. In the formal side of Chinese Buddhism, Each of the Lohans is assigned a station or place in the world and a retinue of lesser saints ranging from 500 to 1600. They are regarded as having been derived from all walks of life, but through their devotion to the Noble Eightfold Path, they have attained liberation from the wheel of rebirth and take on human form only to perform benevolent works as servants of humanity. In the Buddhist hierarchy of attainment, there are 10 levels representing degrees of internal unfoldment. The orders of arhats are placed upon the 3rd to 5th levels, ascending from the state of ordinary mortals. The highest, called the Great Arhat, has attained to the 5th step of the ladder of enlightenment. Most of the arhats belong on the 3rd level, and among them are included the patriarchs or the leaders of the various schools, appointed by a kind of apostolic succession. In China, the list of patriarchs begins with Bodhidharma, recognized as the 28th patriarch from Buddha. After Bodhidharma, 5 other patriarchs in succession are noted, thus completing the cycle with the mystical number 33. In summarizing the structure of Chinese Buddhism, it is therefore necessary to recognize the existence of a subjective pattern with certain formal boundaries and strong traces of internal organization. Disciples ascend according to their merits and attainments, passing through the levels or degrees of their orders. Having attained arhatship, they move into a subjective world, where their growth continues until they attain complete liberation through the experience of the nirvana. As indicated by the distribution of the arhats and their schools, they form an invisible empire of meditating monks bound together by obligations and also by the degree of understanding to which they have attained. Although transplanted from their native Indian soil, these initiates of the Buddhist mysteries are citizens of a philosophic empire and servants of the King of the world who rules from his throne beyond the snowy mountains. Those Chinese Buddhists who affirm their devotion to the original Hindu system are better informed on the inner meaning of the symbolism and recognize that the Buddhist arhats are in no way essentially different from the Hindu Mahatmas and Rishis. They are the great souls, the properly appointed guardians of infant humanity and the heaven-ordained teachers of the race. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.